Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hello, this is Malika Pathak from Miranda House, presenting a course on conductance for the students doing BSc Honours Chemistry or BSc with Chemistry. Module 7, Lecture 1. So, the academic expert of the course is Dr. Amrita T. Sheikh, and the recording is being done under the DDTH Swayam Prabha project of the MHRD, New Delhi. Today we are starting with a topic called conductance. And within conductance, we look at relationship between the electrical energy and chemical energy. So the first topic that we'll study is a introduction to electrochemistry, then a look at conductance and the electrolytic conductance, followed by a look at electrolysis and the Faraday's laws of electrolysis. So let's start with the topic. So before we start with conductance, we need to know what is the relationship between chemistry and electrical energy. So this branch of chemistry, which looks at the relationship between the electrical energy and chemical energy, is called as electrochemistry. So it is defined as the branch of chemistry which deals with the transformation of electrical energy into chemical energy and vice versa. So we know that there are substances which will conduct electricity in the solid state or in the solution state, and these substances are called as either metallic conductors if they conduct electricity in the solid state, and if they conduct electricity in the solution state or in molten state, then they are called as electrolytes. So let's take a look at each of these terms. First, we need to know what are conductors. So conductors are those substances which allow the passage of electric current. Within the conductors, we have metallic conductors and electrolytes. Then there are certain substances which are non-conductors or insulators which do not allow the passage of electric current through them. For example, rubber, wax, wood. These are all examples of non-conductors or insulators, and they do not allow any passage of electric current through them. Now, within the conductors, we just said that there are two kinds. There are metallic conductors and there are electrolytes. So metallic conductors are those conductors or substances which allow electricity to pass through them without undergoing any chemical or physical change. So they are allowing electricity to pass through them in the solid state, and they do not undergo any chemical or physical change. And we know a little about metallic conductors from our previous understanding of the conductors, that the electricity is conducted in the metallic conductors due to the movement of electrons. So if the electrons move in the metal conductors, then the electricity is conducted. So we apply a potential difference across the metallic conductors and the electrons flow, and the electricity moves. So we know that the electrons move from negative terminal to the positive terminal, and the electricity moves from the higher potential to the lower potential. So this is about metallic conductors. So all metals, graphite are all examples of metallic solid conductors. Then we have electrolytes. The electrolytes are those substances which allow electricity to pass through them either in the molten state or in the solution state. So there are substances like sodium chloride. If you melt them, that is, you take the molten form of sodium chloride, then they will allow electricity to pass through them. Or you dissolve sodium chloride in water, that is, you make an aqueous solution of the electrolyte, then again they will allow the passage of electric current. But do they allow passage of electric current in the solid state? No, because within the electrolytes, the passage of electric current is due to the movement of ions. So when you take a sodium chloride solid, then you know that there are Na plus ions and Cl minus ions, and they have strong electrostatic force of attraction between these ions. So the melting point is very high, and because there are strong forces of attraction, these ions cannot move, and because these ions cannot move, they do not conduct electricity in the solid state. But the moment you melt them, the ions become mobile and they start to move around, and because they start to move around, the electricity can be conducted. Similarly, if you dissolve them in water, because of the high dielectric constant of the water, the ions again move apart, they become free, and because they become free, they again allow the passage of electric current. So the electrolytes are substances which are allowing electricity to pass through them, either in the solution state or in the molten state. So within the conductors, we just said what are good conductors. You have copper, you have silver, gold. These are good conductors of electricity. In fact, gold is so expensive, therefore we do not ever talk about it as a good conductor of electricity, but it's one of the good conductors of electricity. Now, within the electrolytic conductors, we've just said that this conduction of electricity is taking place because of the movement of ions or the migration of ions. So, if the ions are not mobile, they will not conduct electricity. So, sodium chloride in the solid state, I have to emphasize, will not conduct electricity. But if you dissolve it in water or you melt it, then it will start conducting electricity. So, all the substances which are have ions, they will be able to conduct electricity either in the molten state or in the solution state. But when these substances conduct electricity, or the electricity is passed through them, they undergo some chemical changes, that is, they undergo decomposition, and there are changes which occur within them, and the composition of these substances changes. Whereas in the metallic conductors, the passage of electric current is due to the movement of ions. Because there is no movement of matter, so their chemical and physical properties do not change. Whereas in the electrolytes, when you take a molten electrolyte, or you take a solution of the aqueous solution of the electrolyte, the ions are moving. The ions like sodium ions are moving, chloride ions are moving, and because these ions are moving, there are chemical changes occurring. There is decomposition which has already taken place, and therefore the composition of these electrolytes change during the process of conduction of electricity. Now let's look at the difference between the metallic conduction and electrolytic conduction in detail. Or as we have said before, that the metallic conduction is due to the movement of electrons, whereas the electrolytic conduction is due to the movement of ions. So in one, the electrons are moving, the other, ions are moving. And because in metallic conduction it is the electrons which is moving, there is no chemical change that is taking place in the conductor, because there is no movement of matter at all. So there are two properties which are emphasizing the same thing. Because of the movement of electrons, there is no transfer of matter and there is no change in the chemical property of the metallic conduction. But whereas in the electrolytic conduction, because the ions are moving, the ions are migrating, this involves the decomposition of the electrolyte. And because the ions of the electrolyte are moving, therefore there is a transfer of matter in the form of ions. So these two properties are related to each other. In one, the electrons are moving, and because electrons are moving, there is no chemical change and there is no transfer of matter. In the electrolytic conduction, because there is ions moving because of the decomposition of the electrons, therefore there is a transfer of matter in the form of ions. Now, one very major difference between the two is because of the temperature. In the metallic conduction decreases with the increase in temperature, because we know that it is the electrons which are moving through the metal, and the metal ions are stationary. So the metallic kernels are stationary, vibrating but stationary, and electrons are moving through the metal. When you increase the temperature, the vibration of these metallic kernels increases. Therefore, the impediment or the resistance to the movement of electrons increases when you increase the temperature. Therefore, metallic conduction decreases when you increase the temperature. Whereas what happens in electrolytic conduction, because it is due to the migration of ions, and when you increase the temperature, the kinetic energy of these ions increases. Therefore, they are able to move fast, and therefore electrolytic conduction increases when you increase in temperature. So this is standard difference between metallic and electrolytic conduction. Now, these conduction of electrolytic ionic solutions depends on various factors. One is the nature of the electrolyte. So the more the number of ions, the more is the conduction. So one is the nature of the electrolyte. Then the size of the ions produced and their solution. We are going to talk about it as we proceed through the topic. Then the nature of the solvent and the viscosity. Again, we are going to study about this later. What is the concentration of the electrolyte? So the conduction also depends upon the concentration of the electrolyte, and we already know about the temperature. So we are going to talk about these variations and the dependence as we proceed. But before we do that, we need to look at the classification of electrolytes. So the electrolytes, are all electrolytes conducting electricity to the same extent? No. There are some electrolytes which will conduct electricity to a larger extent as compared to the others. Now this classification is based on the degree of dissociation. So the degree of dissociation is defined as the fraction of the electrolyte which exists in the form of ions upon the total electrolyte concentration. So alpha is the degree of dissociation. We have already studied a little about it, but it is the fraction of the ions substance which is existing in the form of ions. So we have strong electrolyte, we have medium to strong electrolytes, weak electrolytes and non-electrolyte. So substances which are dissociated to a large extent, that is their alpha value is more than 30% when they are dissolved in water, are called as strong electrolytes. So for example, HCl, H2SO4, HNO3, HI, NaOH, KOH, KCl, NaCl. These are all strong electrolytes. So in fact, if you dissolve NaCl in water or KCl in water, there is nothing like NaCl in water. The Na plus ions are separate, the Cl minus ions are separate. The moment you added them in water, they became separated. Only in the solid state, they were together because of the strong Coulombic forces of attraction. But the moment we put them in water, they got separated into ions. So there is no existence of NaCl in the water. So these are called as strong electrolytes, which are dissociated to a very, very large extent or ionized to a very, very large extent. Then there are certain substances which are between medium to strong electrolytes, which are dissociated between 2 to 30%. For example, phosphoric acid, phosphorus acid. So these are electrolytes, true, but not as strong as the previous one. Then there are weak electrolytes. These are compounds which are dissociated only to a small extent. In fact, their value of alpha is less than 2%. So only 2% of it is maximum dissociated in aqueous solution. For example, ammonium hydroxide, H2S, HCN, carbonic acid, acetic acid. These are all examples of electrolytes. Then there are non-electrolytes. For example, these are compounds which will not conduct electricity in water, like sugar. Sugar, when you dissolve in water, does not conduct electricity. So these are examples of non-electrolytes, and their alpha value is equal to 0. That is, they do not exist in the form of ions at all, and therefore because they are not existing in the form of ions, they will not conduct electricity. So what is electrolytic conductance? To take a look at it, let's look at this diagram. This diagram is of an electrolytic tank. An electrolytic tank is a system or the vessel in which the electrolyte is taken, and we apply current into this electrolyte through the use of electrodes, which are the metal rods which are dipped into the electrolyte, and these metal rods are connected to the two terminals of the battery. The rod which is connected to the negative terminal of the battery is called as cathode. The rod which is connected to the positive terminal of the battery is called as anode. And when we pass electricity through the battery, then this rod has become negatively charged and this rod has become positively charged. Now, the moment we pass electricity, the electrolyte, which has already decomposed into ions, when we have dissolved it in the molten state or we have taken it in the fused state, the ions of these electrolytes start moving towards the opposite electrodes. So the negative ions will move towards the positive electrode and the positive ions are moving towards the negative electrode, and this process is called as electrolysis. Lysis means breakdown and electro means electrical. So with the passage of electricity, there is a breakdown of the substance taking place. So this is called as electrolysis. So when you apply a voltage on the electrodes dipped into the electrolytic solution, the ions of the electrolyte move and therefore the electric current flows through the electrolytic solution, and the ions get deposited on the electrode, and this process is called as electrolysis. electrolysis. Now, just to give you an idea, this is an electrolytic tank, and I have just emphasized this electrolytic tank is also called as electrolysis cell. So this apparatus is electrolytic cell. Now, electrolyte is taken in the form of aqueous solution or in the molten state. We have a battery. The battery is connected to two rods. One is metal rod, which is called as cathode. The other is called as anode. So the one which is connected to the positive pole of the battery is called as the anode. The one which is connected to the negative pole of the battery is called as cathode. Now, the moment you pass electricity through them or the current through the system, what happens is the negative ions will move towards the positive electrode, that is the anode, and the positive ions will move towards the negative electrode, which is the cathode. So you have anions moving towards the anode. Anions are the negatively charged species, cations moving towards the cathode, and cations are the positively charged species. And the current flows from anode to cathode. The current will flow from anode to cathode. So let's look at the electrolysis through the help of molten sodium chloride. So now when we take molten sodium chloride, as I have said, sodium chloride in the solid state consists of sodium ions and the chloride ions joined through the Coulombic forces of attraction. Now when you pass electricity through them, then the cations are sodium ions. The cations will move towards the cathode, and the anions, which are the chloride ions, will move towards the anode. The cations, when they move towards the cathode is negatively charged. They take up electron from the cathode and get reduced. That is, you know what is reduction? Reduction is the gain of electrons. So Na plus, which is the cation, takes up an electrons and forms sodium and gets deposited. This is called as reduction. The chloride ions, which are the anions, the chloride ions move towards the anode. They lose electrons, and we know that oxidation is the loss of electrons. They lose electron and get converted into chlorine gas and are evolved at the anode. So because in the molten sodium chloride we had only two ions, sodium ions and chloride ions. So sodium ions are deposited at the cathode and the chlorine gas is evolved at the anode. Now what happens if I take aqueous sodium chloride? I did say in the aqueous sodium chloride you have taken sodium chloride and dissolved it in water. Now we know that water itself also undergoes autoionization and forms H plus ions and OH minus, although their concentration is very, very low because water is very weakly ionized. So therefore we have four kinds of ions. Sodium chloride is giving you Na plus and Cl minus ions. Water is giving you H plus ions and OH minus, although very, very low in concentration. But we know, and we have studied in the electrochemistry, that based on the reduction potential values, the ions which have higher reduction potential values are discharged at the cathode. The ions which have lower reduction potential values are oxidized at the anode. So we have H plus and Na plus ions. These are the cations, and they both are moving towards the cathode. At the cathode, the one which has got higher reduction potential value will be discharged, and therefore because we have H plus ions and Na plus ions, it is H plus ions which are getting reduced and they form hydrogen gas, and hydrogen gas is evolved at the cathode. At the anode we have two ions, Cl minus and OH minus ions, and we have said the anions which have lower reduction potential value will be evolved, or the discharge. So Cl minus ions, because it has the lower reduction potential value, is discharged in the form of chlorine gas at the anode. So when we do electrolysis of aqueous sodium chloride, we have hydrogen gas at the cathode and chlorine gas at the anode. Whereas what happened in the molten sodium chloride, you had sodium ions getting reduced at the cathode to form sodium metal, and chlorine gas evolved at the anode. So this is the way that you study. So the ions make a difference, and we know according to the electrochemistry, the cation which has higher reduction potential value will be discharged at the cathode. The anion which has lower reduction potential value will be discharged at the anode. So let's take a look at the example of copper sulfate. Now, also this electrolysis depends upon the kind of metal electrodes that you are using. Now, let's look at electrolysis of copper sulfate solution using copper electrodes. So, when we, instead of using platinum electrode, we are using copper electrode, then only the copper is the participating ion. So, although there are 4 kinds of ions which are present, copper 2 plus, sulfate ions, H plus ions and OH minus ions, but at the cathode, because these are participating electrodes, at the cathode copper 2 plus is reduced to form copper metal, and at the anode copper is oxidized to give you copper 2 plus ions. But when you use inert electrode like platinum electrode, this is platinum is then inert electrode, then again the ions are same, but at the cathode again copper will be reduced because it has higher reduction potential as compared to the hydrogen, but there will be a competition between the sulfate and the OH minus, and it is the OH minus which gets oxidized at the anode, and therefore oxygen is evolved at the anode. So what will happen when you use platinum electrode? You will have reddish brown copper deposited at the cathode and oxygen evolved at the anode. Whereas when you are taking electrolysis of copper sulfate using copper electrode, then at the cathode again reddish brown copper is deposited, but at the anode no product is formed. So this is the way. So just take a look at these electrolysis of some of the aqueous solution of salt. You have sodium chloride, sodium sulfate, copper chloride and copper sulfate. The way to work on it is, you see what are the chemical substances involved, how do they ionize, what are the ions. The ions we have already emphasized. The cations which have higher reduction potential value will be reduced at the cathode. The anions which have lower reduction potential values will be oxidized at the anode. So just take a look at these. Sodium chloride, sodium sulfate. We've already talked about sodium chloride. In the case of sodium sulfate, again just see the ions will be Na plus, sulfate, H plus and OH minus. At the cathode, hydrogen gas will be evolved, and at the anode oxygen will be evolved. Please remember that in the case of sulfate there are 2 cases. When you have dilute solution, then always oxygen will be evolved. When you have concentrated solution, then a different thing happens. Similarly with copper sulfate, we have just seen when you take inert electrodes, then copper is deposited at the cathode and oxygen is evolved at the anode. Similarly, when you have copper chloride, inert electrode, copper deposited at the cathode and chlorine gas evolved at the anode. Again copper sulfate, but using copper electrodes, when you have copper, only copper is the participating ion. So at the cathode, copper will be reduced, and at the anode, copper will be oxidized. So this is how we work on electrolysis of some of the aqueous solutions of salt. We need to take a look at the ions that are formed and which one has the higher reduction potential or the lower reduction potential value. Now let's take a look at Faraday's laws of electrolysis. This is Michael Faraday. He's an English chemist who is very well known for his work on electromagnetism, electromagnetic induction, electrolysis, diamagnetism, and he's also the discoverer of benzene. He's very well known for his work on electromagnetism. So he gave 2 laws of electrolysis. So let's take a look at the first law of electrolysis given by him. So Faraday's first law of electrolysis states that the mass of a chemical substance deposited or liberated at any electrode is directly proportional to the quantity of electricity passed through the electrolyte solution or the melt. So what it says is that if I pass Q coulomb of electricity, then the mass which is deposited on the electrode, that is, let's say W, it will be proportional to Q. So W will be proportional to Q because the mass of the substance deposited is proportional to the quantity of electricity passed through the electrolyte. So W is proportional to Q. Whenever we remove the proportionality sign, what is it that we put? We put constant of proportionality. So W is equal to Z into Q, where Z is the constant of proportionality and is called the electrochemical equivalent of the substance deposited. Now if I was measuring current in terms of amperes and time in seconds, then Q can be written as I into T. Therefore, W can be written as Z into Q or Z into I into T. So, if I say that 1 coulomb of electricity is passed, or I say 1 ampere is passed for 1 second, then we realize that W is equal to Z. So, this can be used to define what is Z, or electrochemical equivalent. So, electrochemical equivalent of a substance may be defined as the mass of the substance deposited when a current of 1 ampere is passed for 1 second. So, just to repeat, it is defined as the mass of the substance deposited when a current of 1 ampere is passed for 1 second. So, W is proportional to Q, or W is equal to Z into Q or Z into I into T. Now, what is Faraday's second law of electrolysis? The Faraday's second law of electrolysis states that when the same quantity of electricity is passed through different electrolytes, the mass of different ions liberated at the electrodes are directly proportional to the chemical equivalence. Very true also. We know, let's say if I pass same amount of electricity, how do we do that? We put the 3 electrolytic cells, let's say, in series. Then the same quantity of electricity is going to pass through them. And we know W is equal to Z into Q. If Q is same, then W is proportional to Z. So, instead of Z, what we write is E1 or E2, which is the chemical equivalence. So, when the same quantity of electricity is passed, then the mass of the substance deposited at different electrolytic tanks is proportional to their chemical equivalence. So, W1 by W2 is proportional to E1 by E2. Yeah, W1 by W2 is equal to E1 by E2. So, Z1, we know Z1 IT upon Z2 IT is equal to E1 by E2. Therefore, Z1 upon Z2 is equal to E1 upon E2. So, the mass of different ions liberated is proportional to their chemical equivalence. To increase our understanding of the Faraday's laws of electrolysis, let's look at some of the problems. So, the first problem is how much charge is required for the following reaction. 1 mole of Al3 positive to Al, 1 mole of Cu2 positive to Cu, 1 mole of MnO4 minus to Mn2 plus. Now, 1 Al3 positive requires 3 electrons to form Al. Therefore, 1 mole of Al3 positive will require 3 moles of electrons to form 1 mole of aluminium. Now, what is the charge on 1 mole of electrons? We know that the charge on 1 mole of electrons is calculated by multiplying the number of electrons in 1 mole, which is 6.022 into 10 to the power 23, with the charge on each electron. The charge on each electron is 1.6 into 10 to the power minus 19 coulomb. So, if I multiply 6.022 into 10 to the power 23 with 1.6 into 10 to the power minus 19 coulomb, I get a quantity which is 96,500 coulomb, and that is represented as Faraday, 1 Faraday. So, 1 mole of Al3 positive requires 3 moles of electron, that is 3 Faraday of electricity. So, if I multiply 3 with 96,500 coulomb, then I get the number of the quantity of electricity which is required for the reduction. Similarly, let's take a look at copper 2 plus. So, copper 2 plus requires 2 electrons to give you copper. So, 1 mole of copper 2 plus requires 2 moles of electrons, which is 2 Faraday of electricity. So, 2 into 96,500 coulombs, and we get the answer. Now, taking a look at MnO4 minus going to Mn2 plus. Now, what is the oxidation state of Mn in the MnO4 minus? How do we get that? X plus 4 into minus 2 is equal to minus 1. So, when you solve this, you get the oxidation state of Mn as plus 7. So, Mn plus 7 goes to Mn2 plus by taking 5 electrons. So, what is the charge required? 5 Faraday, which is 5 into 96,500 coulomb. Now, let's take a look at another problem. What is the total charge in coulombs on 1 gram ion of N3 minus? Now, what is 1 gram corresponding to in moles? How can we do that? We divide by atomic mass. So, 1 upon 14 gives you the number of moles in 1 gram of ion of 1,3 minus. So, that is 0.071426. Now, charge on 1 N3 minus is 3 minus. So, the charge on these many moles will be 3 into number of moles of electrons. So, 3 into either 96,500 coulombs, or we do the complete calculation, 3 into 1.6 into 10 to the power minus 19 into 6.02 into 10 to the power 23. Then we get the number of coulombs. We could have directly used 3 Faraday for 1 mole of N3 minus, or you could just do the whole calculation. Now this is on 1 mole, and what is the number that we require it for? 0.0714. So we multiply with that and we get the charge on 1 gram of N3 minus ion. Now let's look at another problem. How many atoms of calcium will be deposited from a solution of calcium chloride by a current of 25 milliampere flowing for 60 seconds? Now, what is the number of Faraday of electricity passed? How do we know that? We know by if Q upon F will give me the number of Faradays. So what is the charge? What is the current? 25 into 10 to the power minus 3 milliamperes across 60 seconds. So 25 into 10 to the power minus 3 into 60 upon 96,500 will give me the number of Faradays of electricity passed. Now if I want to find out the number of moles of calcium atom, you can see that for each calcium it is 2 Faraday. So if I divide it by 2, I will get the number of moles of calcium, because 1 mole of calcium will require 2 Faraday. So we divide by 2 and we get the number of moles of calcium. Now what is the number of moles atoms of calcium that are required? 1 mole of calcium is 6.02 into 10 to the power 23. So these many will be multiplied by 6.02 into 10 to the power 23, and therefore we get the number of atoms of calcium which are deposited when we pass this much amount of electricity. Let's take another problem just to get a better understanding. How much copper will be deposited on the cathode of an electrolytic cell containing copper sulfate solution by the passage of current of 2 amperes for 30 minutes? Now here the time is given as 30 minutes, so we will convert it into seconds, because to get the current in quantity of electricity in coulombs, we take current in amperes and time in seconds. So current 2 amperes, time 30 minutes converted into seconds. 1 minute is equal to 60 seconds, so 30 minutes is equal to 30 into 60 seconds, so we get 1800 seconds. So what is the quantity of electricity? Q is equal to I into T. So 2 into 1800 will give us the number of coulombs of electricity which is passed. Now the reaction is copper 2 plus accepts 2 electrons and forms copper, and 1 mole of copper corresponds to 63.5 grams. So 2 Faraday of electricity passed deposits 1 mole of copper, which is 63.5 gram. So for 3600 coulomb will deposit how many? Just the unitary method, 63.5 divided by 2 Faraday into 3600, and we get this much grams of copper deposited. Very simple, just the unitary method. 2 Faraday is depositing 1 mole of copper, which is 63.5 gram. So 3600 will deposit how many grams, which is 1.18 gram. So today what we have done is we have taken a look at electrochemistry, electrolytic conductance in detail, the electrolysis and the various laws of electrolysis. So with this we have started on the topic conductance, and we are going to do it in detail as we go along. Thank you so much. Stay home, stay safe, and take care of your health and of your family. Thank you.